Welcome to Super Ultra Wide Gaming, your spot for everything super ultra wide. Today we're going to be talking about how to record your super ultra wide content, specifically video games in this case. You will need a powerful PC for this, and this particular PC is running 64 gigabytes of memory clocked at 2666, and yes, I do know I need to upgrade that to some 3200 megahertz because the CPU we are running is the AMD Ryzen 5950X. The graphics card in this system currently is the RTX 3090. For this to work, you will need to have access to a GPU that supports NVENC H.265. So this means RTX 2000 series and above. In some cases, of course, those GPUs will not be powerful enough to necessarily do this, so keep that in mind if you go down all the way to like a 2060, for example. And that's because this is a very demanding process. We're going to be using OBS today to record the gameplay footage, and these are the settings that you will need to go ahead and get configured. You're going to go into your settings and first head on over to video. Your base canvas resolution will need to be bumped up to the 5120 by 1440. And the output scaled resolution will need to be the same. At this point, you will need to change the downscale filter to sharpen scaling, 36 samples. And then on your FPS value, I recommend 30 frames per second. Once again, because this is super demanding, you will get a whole bunch of jitters and skipped frames if you try to go above that in certain titles. An example title that will not work at 60 frames per second is Borderlands 3. An example of a title that may work at 60 frames per second that I have had success with is Prey. So it really depends on how much is going on the screen and so on for essentially how high you can crank up the frame rate. Next, we're going to go ahead and head to Output. Here you're going to want to change your output mode to Advanced and then click the Recording tab. Under the Recording tab, we're going to leave the type as Standard and you will set your recording path. I recommend using an NVMe drive, specifically PCIe 4.0, because that will be able to handle all the write data that will be coming from OBS. Writing to a standard SSD typically does not have enough bandwidth, and PCIe 3.0 will have enough bandwidth, but to be safe, you want to go ahead and use a 4.0 if you do have access to one. The recording format is going to be MK5 or FLV. MP4, MOV, and the rest of the formats will cause issues, especially in the finalization of the recording, and you can lose data. This does mean, though, that you will need to convert the file to a file that's supported by Premiere if your intention is to edit it. You can use something like Handbrake or VLC Studio if you guys need to go ahead and convert it. We can cover that in another video. Let me know in the comment section below if you would find that helpful. Next, we're going to go ahead and get into the advanced settings. The preset's going to be high performance. You can get away with fast on a lot of titles. Once again, we will use the same example. Fast will work and get a higher quality for certain titles like Prey. However, in titles where there's a lot going on, in titles like Borderlands 3, for example, high performance will be needed and the 30 FPS setting. You can go ahead and play with this on individual titles and let me know what your discoveries are down in the comment section below. Next, under the HEVC settings, we are going to set the profile to main, the tier to high, and the level to automatic. For rate control options, we're going to use CQP, constant quantization parameter, and we are going to disable 2-pass. For the look ahead, we are going to set to 0 frames, and we are going to disable adaptive iframes. Under quantization parameters, we are going to set the iframe QP to 0, the pframe QP to 0, and the bframe QP to 0. Under adaptive quantization, we will disable both options. And under other options, we will set the maximum bframes to 0 frames. The bframe reference mode to disabled. 0 latency will be set to default. And then the 3 that you're going to change will be the bframe reference mode. And then the weighted prediction will be set to disabled. And the non-reference pframes will be set to disabled. And you can leave access unit delimiter to default. Decoded picture buffer size will be set to -1 frames. And then finally, under keyframes, we are going to set the interval type to seconds and set the seconds to ½ a second. At this point, you can go ahead and click apply, and then your base canvas will be changed. And then at that point, you can click add and your game capture. Now we already have a game capture here, so we're going to go into the properties, and under here we're going to just have capture any full screen application. Now this will work for a majority of titles, especially newer titles that have the proper hooks that are needed for NVENC to function and OBS to pull. In some cases this may not work. There are titles like Destiny 2, for example, where you could try to possibly either target the specific application, in which case it will work sometimes, but it is kind of spotty. And then of course you could try just capturing the screen, but that will require or not have as good quality and have some issues there as well. So some titles this won't work for, and you'll have to play around with some stuff. But at this time, because we don't have any sort of option for a display input or a capture card to record this type of content, you will need a beefy machine and be limited on the titles that you are able to record. Red Dead Redemption 2 is working, and so that one is good, as well as some of the newer titles across the board that I've tested would be like Doom Eternal, for example. And so there is a lot of stuff you can play around with if you're looking at doing this type of content. All right, so at this point you would just open it up and start the title and then hit the start recording button. Once you're done, you can just go back to, of course, the directory in which you recorded it. For example, for me, that's under videos and then the OBS folder, and then you will basically have your super ultra wide content. I'll show a clip here of Borderlands 3 and a quick clip of Prey, and then you guys can go ahead and check out the quality there. For all things super ultra wide gaming, be sure to hit the sub, notification bell, and go ahead and hit the like button because that helps out the algorithm. If you guys are interested in any of my other content that revolves around basic tech reviews and cryptocurrency, you can check out my channel Son of a Tech, and I will leave a link for that in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.